Took a while, didn't it? But we got there.
We got there. It's always you had no idea if it's going to work first time or not. But anyway, we got there. How you doing? Everything's good?
Really good, mate. How are you?
Yes, very good. Busy, but I can't complain to be honest with you. Everything's going well. So I'm happy to be on here with you today, chatting. So looking forward to it.
Look, likewise, mate. Really looking forward to this,
Good. And it's going to be about half an hour long, but I know that we'd probably be able to talk for at least an hour. But we're gonna
if
we're
not
gonna
more.
try to do it for a half an hour, if not more. Exactly, we're going to try to do it for half an hour, and you never know. There may be appetite for people to want more, so we'll try to condense it. But I want to start at the beginning, look, because that's the best place to start. Your childhood, and I believe a turning point in how you viewed mental health and probably masculinity happened at a very young age. I believe it's about 8 years old.
Yep.
Tell me firstly a little bit about what happened, and then we'll explore that impact of how it impacted you.
It's really nice actually because my beautiful mother is actually watching.
Oh,
So
it's
yeah. So when my parents separated when I was 8, my mum tragically had a car crash, which left her with some brain damage, and then they found a big cyst on her brain. And ever since then, she's had a rare illness called need. It's becoming a bit more common now where she has drop attacks. So that was my first introduction to mental illness. And then obviously after that, own personal things and situations with mental health and poor mental health as well as positive mental health. I think too often we speak about mental health in a real negative sense. And I was talking to some people about this today actually around when we think of mental health. We often think of anxiety, depression, suicide, stress, and we don't talk enough about self-confidence, self-belief, patience, calm, peace, joyfulness. So I was talking to my mum about this the other day. Often when we talk about things from the past, we do go to the negatives, myself included, we all do, because that's what people are going to relate to the hardships. But actually, that was one day of my life and one day of hers. And I know for her, there's been lots of hardships day to day from that. But there's also lots of beautiful things that have happened through my childhood, especially. And I think I'm often blessed to have gone through what I've been through. So it's sort of built me into how I am today.
what a beautiful way to view it because life in general will have its hard times, but also have its beautiful times, and how we view life and especially the down times really will impact us. And you've just said it there. Yes, it was a bad time, and you'll remember it, and we're talking about it, but yet there's so much beauty around it. So it's lovely to even just break down that initially, right from the get go. Um, so obviously, difficult thing for anybody to go through age 8 years old. I believe there's also in school bullying and things like that. How did it impact you? How did it impact your mental health, firstly? And then, secondly, how did it start shaping your idea of what a man should be? Because, we get our ideas of what a man should be and this idea of what masculinity is from an early age, and we develop it as we get older. How did you see yours starting to develop right from a young age?
Yeah, lots to unpick there. I think I'm very fortunate. I've got a great dad, a great man,
Okay.
great role model. So I don't think I often have the stereotypical. Um, I don't view it as negative. My dad is a very strong, tough man. People would categorise it as an old school sort of guy, but I think there's still a place in the world for that, and I think it's what's going to be really interesting delving into masculinity. I think there's lots of discussions and conversations happening, but not enough around still that men still need to have an element of strength, of being a protector, of being a provider, which I think we'll delve into in a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we're probably swaying far away from that now, like we do with anything human beings. We've got to go to the extreme of the other side, haven't we, to then find a balance and go back the other way. But I think when I was at school, I were a comfy and bigger kid, naturally going to get picked on a bit, like you do, and having a hard time. But that I just view now everything that just shapes you to be how you are. So I very rarely care what people think now,
Yeah.
positively or negatively. It's nice if people have got something nice to say, and but it's irrelevant. It's ultimately down to what you think of yourself. But I think in order to get to that point, you've got to go through a series of events. So primary school, going through, some of the stuff I went through, then transition to high school where probably when I hit like year 9, 10, I started finding fitness, started finding health. That probably shaped me into being a little bit more stoic in some of my beliefs. I'm not probably want a bad thing because I ultimately went on to be a professional rugby player. And you've got to have a level of masking your emotions because you're getting whacked continuously. Um, one until probably later on that I really experienced my own probably real hardships. All sorts happened, but when you think of stuff, it always happened to someone else. It happened to my mom. There's an impact on me. People dying, it happened to me. But when I think of when I got let go from Leeds Rhinos, that was like a real identity crisis for me because I no longer look I'm a Leeds Rhinos player. I would lost all control from someone who worried a lot and often wanted to grasp control. When I then lost control, I couldn't be that Leeds Rhinos player because it was out of my control now. They didn't want me. You're not good enough. All these type of things, and you start to put that on yourself, and then a separation from my partner, and my whole life just felt like it was sort of spiraling. I guess in a sense. So that were a really interesting time in my life, and it was definitely a darker time of my life.
Yeah. And you say there about the setbacks, about being let go by the Leeds Rhinos. Now, I think men especially put so much emphasis in this idea of masculinity and success and achievement. When we have that setback, when we have that, when you've been let go there and the achievement no longer seems possible, as a man especially, how much pressure did you put on yourself to feel like you were not wanted, that you were not achieving? And that's what men should be. That's what men should be doing. Did you feel that pressure? And I'm sure if you did, how did it impact you?
Yeah, I think at times as there's a little bit in this, and it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this. So first off, I had a lot of blame.
Okay.
Not my fault. Not my fault. Other people's fault. Or disservice I'd done held a lot of anger inside, a lot of resentment, a lot of bitterness,
Yeah.
a lot of feelings of like you say, not worthy. And that can build up in its own different ways.
Yeah.
But now I had this discussion with Dad actually, and he will disagree.
Okay.
But sometimes as a man, it's hard to admit that sometimes maybe you just weren't good enough,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
And people don't want to admit that, but there probably comes to a time when maybe I just weren't good enough at that level, and that's okay. Because what it did do is it sent me on a path to do what I do now, where I love what I do now. I'm very fortunate to do what I do now on a day-to-day basis, every single day. And I probably won't have the level of appreciation. I probably won't be the leader I am. I probably won't have done the things I've done if I wouldn't have been and let go. So then you'd say, was it a success? Was it a failure? Because I never quit. And I often tell my kids this. My kids are, if you follow me on socials or anyone does, they'll see how passionate I am about my kids and achieving and pushing. And the interesting thing I always tell them is that there is no such thing as failing. There's only such thing as winning or quitting. Because ultimately, you're only out when you tap out. So as long as you're still in the race, whether that's a 5K race, a 10K race, maths test, business, whatever it is you try to do, CrossFit, as my oldest is now into, you've just got to stay in the race, haven't you? And ultimately, as you're in that race, it's going to change, your path changes. If you'd have said to me, 10 years ago, you will speak all over Europe, you'll be leading a charity, you'll be doing this, that, and I laughed and said, no, I'm going to be a rugby player. So
Yeah.
now, 10 years on to be doing this, I'd have laughed. So, but that's the way that life changes continuously, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think already there we've got such a great lesson where men will maybe more so than any other gender put so much emphasis on achievement and success, but what is success? What is achievement? And it's not that just that one destination of, well, I need to be a rugby player, I need to be a football player, whatever it may be. It's a whole complete and utter journey. You probably don't know what your success actually looks like because, likewise, when I was a police officer, I had this idea where I'll climb the ladder, right? I'll become a sergeant, then I'll become an inspector, and I'll keep climbing the ladder. And when all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, this isn't my path. And like you, where I look now, I'm like, wait a minute, now I'm speaking across Europe and across the world about mental health and resilience, all these things. That wasn't success to me when I joined the police. Success for me was climbing that ladder. And I could have easily thought, wait a minute, but I'm not succeeding. But my path just looks very different. So that's such a great lesson right from the get go. we have to constantly redefine what success actually is. And as you say, it's about not tapping out. It's about keep going, and that is the most success that we can actually have in achievement. It's just putting one foot ahead of the other, and each day might look different. And we talk quite a lot about this with mental health. Guess what? You're going to have bad days. Of course you are. Not every day is going to be a success. Even people who are saying, I'm so happy, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. Not every day is going to be amazing, and that's fine. There's that toxicity that exists that people think just because we're happy, it means that we're happy every single day of our lives, and that's just not true. Now, you've perfectly said about your story there with getting let go by the Leeds Rhinos, and where did that journey go then? Tell me, what's the mindset right then when we can look back and think it was the best thing that's ever happened to you because you are doing what you are doing now, but right then and there when you were let go, what were you thinking? Where do you think your life's going to go from there?
I guess at the time, probably not much idea. Probably trying to wing it and find the positives at the time in it, and you can only mask it for so long, can't you? And pretend you're all right for so long before it
Yeah,
becomes too much.
yeah,
Plus, didn't really talk too much about it.
yeah,
Start going out a little bit more than I would. I've never really been a drinker. I've never been a drug sort. It's not something I can often dive into in that sense of addiction. But I probably went out and drank way more than I would have, which to most people is probably a normal night out, right?
yeah.
But just found myself in a spot of bother, and then I had a real moment of accountability where it were like, "It's on you, Luke." And the question that I often ask now, I'm a big believer in questions, is what's next? What are you going to do about it? And I often think it's funny if like two guys bumped into each other in a street, you're quickly going to ask them what they're going to do. Like, what are you going to do? Right? That's how, like, it's like two lions meeting or two dogs.
Yeah.
But I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, like, what are you going to do about it? Not anyone else, not anyone else's fault. Ultimately, look, you've got to take responsibility. And that one moment of clarity, that one moment of acceptance. Listen, anyone who goes through anything, addiction, mental health problems, financial problems, business, career change, parenting, if you're in a downward spiral, there'll come a point where you have to accept that you are not where you need to be. And once you've had that acceptance, and I get asked this question all the time, how do I get a guy to come on e group? How do I tell my daughter she needs her? And I'm like, you can't. Like, and it sounds so sad. And I said, I know it's not the answer you're looking for, but someone has to accept a problem first. And that's what I had to do. I accepted a problem. I accepted one. I want the human I needed to be. I want the man I needed to be. And I had to make changes in order to better my life. And we're all still on that journey now, right? Because you brought that idea of success. I think success is a really interesting one because it's not infinite, right? So, a rugby player is a great example. You can be a grand final winner one year or an England player one year, and year after you're not. So therefore, you're now no longer a success. Or are you a success because it's something you did 10 years ago? This is what's the ebbing and flowing of life, right?
Yeah.
So then I've always brought this down, and ultimately, right now, what I think is, to me, and this isn't to anyone else, being successful is being a good dad to me. But the funny thing about that is there is no measure for that. There is no marker. There is no grand final because it's a continuous learning every single day because it's never, no 2 days are ever the same as a dad. No year is ever the same because one year you're dealing with 3 little kids, and then you've got a teenager and 2 little kids. Then you've got a teenager, someone who's nearly a teenager, and then a little kid that's no longer a little kid. So you're constantly trying to ebb and flow and work out what that is. And that in itself is a challenge. While then you're also trying to do stuff for your own personal, physical, mental health. Then you're also trying to be a good partner along the way. You're trying to run a business or be a speaker or have a career or whatever else it is anyone's trying to do who's listening. So then you say, well, like, what ultimately is success? And I think if you to summarise it, and I often use my little Irish nana as an example here, and she was 5 foot nothing in societal terms, probably wouldn't have been deemed successful because a big career or big fancy house, but all 12 or 15 grandkids, big Irish family, all looked at her as a queen, right? And she left a big hole in everyone's heart when she passed away, as I know my parents will to my grandkids, right, and myself. So therefore, you'd say, is that the success? Is the success the moment that you die, that people look back on the little line that you've left, the little dash, the little line that represents your energy? Is that successful when people are upset that you're no longer here? And that then tracks back to saying, ultimately, it's how you make other people feel, isn't it? and you can only make other people feel good. You can only be a good feeling around other people if you are in the best shape possible, physically and mentally.
100%. 100%. I love that. I love everything about it because I speak about this, and I know you will too, that we can't pour from an empty cup. We can't be there for other people at our peak level if we're not at our peak level too. People think it's selfish. It's not selfish. It's the most selfless thing that you can do. Put yourself first. Be in the optimal place in your life and mentally so that you can help people and give back in that way. Because I've been there when I've hit rock bottom. I couldn't be good to anybody. I wasn't good to anybody. I wasn't the best friend to anybody. I wasn't the best colleague or whatever it may be. It was only when I'm in the best place mentally that's when I can be there for people and actually help them. So, and I find that difficult in the police because literally it was my job to help people. I'd talk people down from window ledges and bridges. I'd convince them to live one more day. But when I was going through my difficult spell, I was always looking at them and thinking, I wish I was on that bridge instead. But I had to put it to the side and just think, no, that's my problem. I need to help them. And throughout the years, I just felt like it was chipping away at me day in and day out because I was literally helping other people, but not helping myself first. And I really, really struggled. And that's why I hit rock bottom. Now, I'll just quickly rewind back to the rugby life because I'm just curious about this. Now, in the police, I've seen a macho culture within the police. Not saying every police force is going to be like it, but in my experience, it was. There was no psychological safety there. None. Absolutely none. How did you feel that in the rugby sense? Because rugby is going to be a macho culture. I'm sure you probably experienced it to some kind of level. Did you have psychological safety within there? Did you need it within that grip environment? And how did that impact you?
I think that goes really deeper to the team you're in. So, I played in
Yeah,
multiple teams. Some teams, I'd say, best of friends, could probably, they had each of us back no matter what. Other teams, not so much. I used to get asked when I first started in the man club, oh, it must have been, must have been great being around your rugby team at that time. And probably not. There probably wasn't much change at that time, because of the sort of environment you're in. Still, it's quite taboo, quite toxic. Probably I were a bit different then. But what I do see now is a huge change across all sports. The way that people talk about mental health, I imagine being in a team environment now is much more beneficial. I think, in any sport, I think at one point it would have been completely frowned upon. And then I watch a lot of sports documentaries because I like to unpick stuff. And I watched the Simone Biles one, and I
yeah,
think, what she did dropping out of the Olympics, that would have never been spoke about 10 years ago.
no,
Never even dared to do that. Wow. So we've come a long way
yeah,
to where people probably are more comfortable admitting these issues and problems and pressures. But back then, I would say it wasn't very psychologically safe.
yeah,
In some of the teams are in. I don't want to do discredit to some other teams and some other teammates. And I'd probably played a part in that. I'm not going to sit there and say I was this guy then who, would have been, because a lot of those cultures, I work in the prison service a lot, than work with the police, and you know that the only way to deal with a lot of the stuff that you see on a daily basis, suddenly when talking to someone off a bridge becomes your normal day-to-day job, you can only mask that with humour. Not
yeah,
about the
100%.
situation that person's in, but when you're going back, the only way you know how to express yourself, which isn't a bad thing either, but
Yeah,
you use a certain level of humour and you know what I'm talking about because, I see it with prison officers and the rest is it's sort of a darker humour where it's like you express yourself but through humour. And I have to not think that's a bad thing to be able to laugh through your problems at times, and if any way to express or vent is a positive.
100%. I completely agree. And I always say this when I give talks too, where the dark humor is not the bad thing. The only problem is when the dark humor is the only coping mechanism.
Correct.
That's the problem. For me, I've experienced that where it was just humor, and we were never talking about anything else. So
Yep.
it you weren't processing your emotions. You were taking it home with you. Your head hit the pillow each night, and that's when all of a sudden you were thinking about all these things. Oh, could I have done something to save someone's life? You were literally driving yourself crazy, so to
Crazy.
speak, and a very, very difficult time. Now, how do we create better, not even just cultures, but let's just think of teams in whether it's in sport or whatever. We'll all have some form of group around us. Most of us will, whether it's work or sport or just friend group. How do you think, what's the best thing that we can do to create a psychological safe environment where people are a little bit more open, or they feel like they can be anyway?
Yeah, so I think it is culture and it's language. I'm part of a few different groups. I don't mean mental health groups, I mean friendship groups where some it's just all out war groups. We're doing triathlon and everyone in there is anyone who does endurance sports is had some demons at some point, otherwise they won't do endurance sports because it's verging on insanity, isn't it? So, or merging on insanity. So in them, some of them groups, I witnessed one recently actually. What were really nice is it's a very big banter group, it's just normal, typical lads. I think there were two of the guys who opened up actually, and it was quite beautiful to see. So I think once you have a level of respect for individuals, that would create itself anyway. And I have to think language like, if I'm speaking to a friend about something more serious, I'll say, banter aside, let me tell you about this. And I think that way then they know the space is serious, and I'd expect them the same. And I think it's just reliability in it. I think reliability is a big one. I run an organisation that encourages people to talk, separate to I have multiple organisations, but one is a charity where we encourage people to talk. And what we've got as an interesting conundrum is that the vast majority of our staff are guys who use a group. Their main coping mechanism in life now is the group, and then we take that away from when they start working for us because it's very hard to go back to that group. So we try and have in our work in the workspace, we have a Monday check-in, which is the same as the online, but is the same as in person, with a Friday check-in. And that probably still maybe wasn't enough for some of them. So now that there's just been another level put in, which is an actual online, weekly or bi-weekly online catch-up, which is compulsory. If they want to come on and have a
Yeah,
chat, that's brilliant. So
amazing.
I think it's just in workplaces or in social groups. It's finding your tribe on that type of thing as well. Like you don't. What we're trying to say here is that not every, and this is where I want to get a message across here. Not every group of friends needs to be the serious group of friends where you do need to talk about it. You need some
100%.
other distractions and escapes in life where it's actually, I like to go in that group because we just talk shit. We talk triathlon, we have a laugh, we have banner. But then actually, I've got some friends who, if shit is the fun, I can give them a ring and say, this is how it's going. But he's a really interesting one that I heard, right? And I went on a podcast and I asked the guest this, and I says, realistically, and you've probably might have heard this or seen this, but realistically, how many friends do you have that you would call in a crisis, right? And there might be 5 or 10 people that you could count on. So then actually, here's what the interesting thing is we're all actually open to ringing someone in a crisis. But how many friends would you ring with good news?
Yeah, that's very true.
And very few, isn't there, that you would want to say because you're scared of bragging, you're scared of coming across cocky or arrogant. And I think that's a bit of a problem. So we're talking about mental health, and we're okay to say to someone, we're trying to build cultures where I can say I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I'm worried. But what about if we can try to create a way we can say, I'm feeling real confident at a minute. Life's good at a minute. My relationship's cool. My business is growing. And then the other person be like, I'm genuinely happy for you there, and I want to do the same. And then you clap back for them. I think that would help mental health. And that would help people really push forward and be more resilient and happier in life.
100%. I completely agree. And in my TEDx talk, I spoke about that where I say, look at the people who you're surrounding yourself with. And it's not just about the people who will lift you up when you need lift up. It's about the ones who will celebrate you when you need celebrated. And you've hit the nail on the head. There's a big difference. And I think a lot of us can maybe have one, but not the other. And especially the celebration thing, because we might think, oh, I don't want to appear arrogant. I'm like, oh, this is all going well. And them then to be impacted by my success, and they're maybe thinking, oh, lucky them, or whatever it may be. And I think it's a true friend when you can do that, and I think that takes a real connection that you can share the good and the bad with. And I
Yep.
love what you've just said about we all are going to have different groups, and just if you have a group that you cannot open up to because it's just banter central, that's actually fine because we need that because life is that balance. We want to have a group where, yes, we can share openly stuff with you, of course, but also having those friends who are like, I'll not share stuff with them, like with this serious kind of stuff or talk to them about serious stuff. But my God, they're good friends and we can just have the banter. It's such a good balance. Now, To go back to specifically masculinity, I want to ask you. You talked about you did say you have two children. Was it two
Three.
daughters?
Three.
Three.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And are they all daughters? Did you say?
No, I've got a
Or
stepson and two daughters.
okay, perfect. Well, this is interesting then. So we've got the different genders. How do you, as a parent, how do you portray what it means to be a man and this idea of masculinity, a modern man in this day and age? What kind of ways do you help teach them about masculinity? Because there's so much toxic masculinity that exists out there. There's people out there that we've probably all heard of that are spreading awful things about what it means to be a man and how they should view women and things like that. And that's very damaging for the newer generation. How do we, especially as parents for yourself, how do we teach that new generation of what actually does mean to be a man?
So really interesting this, and this may create, diverse opinion, but I bring my kids up different. And not because one happens to be a stepson and another's daughter. If it were vice versa, it was stepdaughter and middle one were a boy, I just think where we get it lost within this whole thing. So I'm not far left, I'm not far right. I'm probably bang in middle in the
Yeah,
fact that we still need strong men in this world.
yeah, yeah,
That's a fact. We need to have men who can deal with what they're facing, because ultimately, no matter how you're feeling, you still have responsibilities. So no matter how I'm feeling on a day to day, my kids still need feeding. End of the week, end of the day, they need feeding no matter what. No matter how I'm feeling, no matter how hard life hits me, no matter if I go home with a tragedy, I've still got to feed my kids and shelter them, because that's my responsibility as a man, right?
yeah,
So how I bring my son up, and I don't want to keep saying the word stepson because I still see him as a son, is that I am strict with him, and he's turning into a phenomenal young man.
okay.
He's in great crowds. He's got good friends. He crossfits. He runs. He's got all the habits, and he's surrounded. He goes out running with my friends now. Without, even if I'm not there, he's out with them. He's into everything.
He's replacing you.
He's replacing me, because ultimately you've just summed it up. I'm training my replacement. If I happen to go next year, in 5 years from now, he's man of the house. And I know not everyone will like to hear that, because we live in a world of equality, which I agree with. I've got two daughters who I adore. I've got a wife who's phenomenal at what she does. She's a successful business owner. She's slays it. She kills it. And I've got a phenomenal mom and other women in my life. So I think there's great places for both male and women still in the world, and I think the equality movement has been great. But I still believe in the fact that my son needs to be ready to lead that family should I no longer be here. And I say lead, I don't mean he takes over his mum, but he might have to protect that family. And I don't necessarily mean in the old days of war, but just protect them in ways, of psychological safety, of being that strong figure around them. So yes, I'm a massive believer in empathy, kindness, caring, being there for people. But I'm also a big believer in him. Here's an example of feeling how he's feeling, expressing it, but finding ways to deal with what he needs to deal with. To go get his shit done, which at this point is building up for GCSEs. He's doing his CrossFit. He's doing all the things that he knows is going to benefit him, and will support him in any way with that. And
Yeah,
with girls, I want them to understand, what it means to find a good man in life, a guy who is caring, protective, and provider. And I'm not going to then say that I don't do dishes at home and that I'm suddenly some big stoic. I do dishes, I do washing. My missus, if you're listening out there,
oh,
no, no.
unfortunately.
Yes. So, and I want to make that clear there, that it's not men are men and women are women, but I do think there should still be elements of what's not spoke about with toxic masculinity in the field of that and in the topic of that when we're talking about as kids, there's an element of it. It's not shut up and get on with it anymore, in my opinion, and pretend it's not happening. It's how can we deal with it? How can I deal with what's going on between me? So if my son is acting up, he needs to understand that that's not acceptable. And rather than punishment and rather than rules, we use the word standards. Like them standards are acceptable in our household,
Yeah,
and that's for boys and girls. But for him, he just knows that one day he's going to have to lead and set the standards, which he does now. Which is why his sister's following in his footsteps, and his other sister
okay.
will follow in his footsteps. So that's my take on that, and I think that there's a real shortage for young boys because of the roles, because of the situations with people separating,
Yeah,
no male, positive male, a lot or lack of positive male primary school teachers.
okay.
There's a lot of broken homes out there. So what we're finding is a shortage of young men as they're growing up, aspiring to be
Yeah.
finding things to aspire to, which is why things like boxing clubs, running clubs, rugby clubs, football
Yeah.
clubs, and still having these strong figures is so important for young men.
And so let's just ask this question. We're running out of time. We'll ask this question. How can you be the best possible positive role model as a man for the future generation? Then, like you're saying about these people, how can they be better? Because you're saying there's a shortage of them. So what do they need to do? Because
When
I
I say
agree with you.
when I say shortage, I just mean that we don't actually have male primary school teachers now. So
Okay,
that's what I mean. Short. I don't even mean necessarily
that's true.
shortage in terms of their standards. I think there's
Yeah,
so many great men out there, just not
yeah,
around these young men enough. Which is why, like, if you've got a young kid and they're sitting at home on the PlayStation all night, they're not going to be around positive
yeah,
men. So I talk about a group of boys and men that I have around me, which is my friends who are all hold each other to account and standards in triathlon and fitness.
yeah,
My son is around them.
yeah,
So, he sees on a Tuesday morning a group of guys go out running together, hunting together, sit in a sauna together, which he comes and does, and then go for a
yeah,
coffee together, which he comes and does. Like that,
yeah,
that's him seeing these guys who are all successful in their own ways, whether they're PTs, whether they're business owners, they've got good careers. He's witnessing those type of conversations. So I guess what I'm saying is that we need to put us put our kids in those situations, whether that be at a local running club, basketball
yeah,
club, whatever. But having those type of figures around us, if you don't already have them in the home. But
yeah,
actually, as men, we've just got to set the standards ourselves, haven't we? Because whether
yeah.
you've got kids or not, you've got to set the standards in your workplace. Are you
Right.
holding yourself to the best account? Are you trying to be the best man you can be?
Yeah,
And that is being, and that's why I'm saying left and right. It's been comparing, compassionate, kind, caring, empathetic, while also
yeah,
still facing up to your responsibilities as a man and knowing
yeah,
that you've got stuff that needs that business that needs handling and leading from the front in that and being a problem solver
yeah.
because that's what we need to be. In my opinion, that is.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because this whole thing in this discussion is all about rebranding masculinity. And correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that with this rebranding masculinity, we don't want to get to the point where we're actually forgetting to have masculine energy because there's a need for men to have the
100%.
masculine energy. We can't get rid of it. I agree with you. There has to be a little bit of fluidity in terms of roles and things like that. But you're saying, yes, we have to have a rebrand in terms of psychological safety and positive role models. But what it means to be a man, it still is predominantly masculine energy driven.
Yeah,
Is that
I
what you get?
100%, no, I 100% agree. I think we still need to have masculine energy. And I think if you ask any woman deep down, that's what she wants.
Yeah,
100%
yeah,
wants that. If we're talking a heterosexual relationship, I think even in a non-heterosexual relationship,
yeah, yeah,
someone would still want masculine energy there, and just like a man craves feminine energy, and they
yeah,
want to be cared for and thing, and that's why we have roles of mothers and fathers, like two completely different roles. A mother is there to mother the kid, which is
yeah,
to offer nurture, to offer thing. A male is there to be rough and play and bring them up in the world. And I often
yeah.
thought of a bit of an analogy. My sister has a farm, right?
Okay.
And I went to see it in Scotland for the first time when I was driving down the other week. And all the female cows were all in one pen, obviously, because they don't just breed. And the bulls were in the other. And the bulls have a little scuff on their head, right?
Okay.
And the females are all just wait. You come in, and they come running over if there's any food. And if they've got babies, they're feeding the babies and they're nurturing them. And it's just like what we are as animals. The bulls all had these scuffs on their head. And I said to Phil, my sister's partner, I says, what's them ball patches? He said they just headbutt each other. It's how they play, and they just headbutt each other, and they just have some
Yeah.
fun. And I think that just reminds me of some of me and my friends at times. But
Yeah.
that's clearly the difference between male and females.
Yeah.
Any human species out there, they have definitive roles, don't they?
Yeah.
Lions, lionesses, and I think it's just such a concept that I don't want to lose that in the conversation of masculinity. That we should
I
suddenly
agree.
stop having men
I
and stop
agree.
having strong men. And a strong man to me don't mean someone who's pretending that everything's perfect in life. They're creating a perfectionist image. Actually, it's someone who accepts that they're perfectly imperfect, that they've got shit going on. They accept the flaws and they try each and every day to work on them, while showing the kids or the next generation like this is how to be as a man. That's just, as I say, it's an opinion. It's not a
Yeah.
fact. And I think there's so much dialect around this now, and I just think it's so interesting
Yeah.
that I do genuinely really passionate that we still need strong men in the world.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think you've hit the nail on the head where the masculine energy still, there's still a massive place for it, and we risk losing it if we're not careful with this whole modern man and rebranding masculinity. It's just about finding that right balance. And I think we can create strong men by still being having that masculine energy. Strong men rebranding what a man needs to be. It doesn't need to be a feminine energy. It just needs to be rebranding what the masculine energy is a little bit. And what you're saying about what a strong man is, that's all tick box, all right there. What you said about that list, that is for me, yes, 100%. That is a strong man who still leads with the masculine energy. But yes, of course, there's a little bit of fluidity on it, and we just don't want to risk when we're rebranding this idea of what it means to be a man. Let's not forget what it actually is to be have a masculine energy and the importance of it, because there's so much toxicity out there about masculinity that we potentially, and there's maybe a lot of people view it as a negative thing, but it's not. It's a positive thing when it's used right. And what you've just said from this whole 30 odd minutes is how we can use the masculine energy, but in the best possible way. So thank you
100%.
so much.
And
I
and I
appreciate
think
it.
and I think one thing that I hope starts to get highlighted about, and I hope conversations start happening around parenting. I think
Yeah.
there's not enough emphasis on the role of the parents. We're quick now to blame schools. We're quick now to blame other outside sources, and there might be periods of that. But ultimately, you know, and adolescence brought up a lot of things for a lot of people. And I
Yeah.
think what the parents did at the end is took ultimate accountability. If you watch that, and they were like, could we have done more? Could we have gone and checked his phone? Could we
Yeah.
have done that? And I think that's such a big thing. I think, you know, like having that level of control, having that level of thing, and I'm often big on that. Like when your kids live in your house, it's under your rule, isn't it? There's a great book out there called The Child CEO, and I think too often now what we're getting wrong is and this is where it's, about control is that some people are allowing their kids to be the CEO of the family, and
Yeah.
that's not how the world
Oh,
works.
I
It's not
agree.
how the
I
world works.
agree.
So
I agree.
that's an element of masculinity is that we also need two strong parents, male, female, feminine, masculine, who combine together to help give the kids the best start in life. And then
Yeah.
after that, they're going to find their own influences. But if you've set the standards high enough
Yeah.
and you put the right processes in place for them to thrive, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
hopefully they'll come home and tell you if they're having a situation at school. So
Yeah.
that's where the psychological safety, it starts in your home, never mind in your own friendship groups. It starts in your own home, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And look, I'm actually going to be speaking about parenthood and especially fatherhood in a couple of weeks. And I would love to have you back on after who I've got on
100%.
to maybe quiz you about what they say and if there's any discussion about what you agree and disagree with, because we could talk so much more about mental health. We've probably not even delved even remotely into all the mental health stuff, but the fatherhood stuff, what it means to be a parent and bringing up the new modern man and the new generation, I can already see that there's so many more and so many thoughts that you've got. And I'd love to delve into them more. So let's
100%.
get you on that in a couple of weeks because I think people would be interested. And I can already tell that people are interested in it. So let's do that. And I just really appreciate you coming on today and speaking about mental health and the idea of what it means to be a modern man and this idea of masculinity. So I really appreciate it.
No, man, thanks for man. 100% up for that as well.
Honestly, awesome. I can't wait. Cannot wait. Right. Thank you so much and take care.
See you soon, mate.
See you soon. Bye. Bye. Bye.